always a... so you're not sleeping, good. It's always a pleasure to be back at RDIS, and I thank the organizers very much for inviting me for this very interesting topic of contemporary management practices. I'm very honored to be here, and especially in such august gathering. Colonel Doctor, sir, over there, and of course Dr. Madhu Vij of FMS, and our keynote speaker today, Mr. Biju Barki. His presentation was, as Dr. Vij mentioned, was scintillating. It certainly opened up a lot of questions, and there's a lot of feedback? Okay, wait up. All right. And I must say that it's a very hard act to follow because he touched upon so many aspects, I think, which are so relevant. But looking at today's topic, contemporary management practices, opportunities and challenges, I thought I would dwell on the technology aspect, since our chief guest mentioned that technology and management and media are so interdependent and intertwined. If you hark back to contemporary practice, if you look at contemporary practices today, I think I'll dispense with this. It's causing a lot of feedback? Yeah, okay. If you look at contemporary practices today in relation to what it was like 40 years ago when I started working, particularly in the area that I'm familiar with, and that is technology, there have been rapid strides from the good old data center environment, which was prevalent in the 70s, right through the 90s. If you wanted reports or whatever it was done by these humongous, gigantic machines, which had to be maintained 4 degrees Celsius, and massive rooms. I mean, a totally clean environment, and with drives, disk drives. And in the early days when I started, they were still using punch cards, holodeck punch cards, which I think they're collector's items today. But anyway, and then to give you an idea of how crazy it sounds, because many of you young men and women would probably not have even seen something like that, not even in the movies. You had, I started my career with IBM, and the IBM 1316 disk, a cross between a dish and a washing machine. It was humongous. It had this big 18-inch 6 plates, which was the disk pack, and 10 read-write surfaces. The average seek time was 11.4 milliseconds, which was considered incredibly fast, and its rotational speed was 1800 RPM. And this massive thing which you picked up like that, unlocked, picked up, and carried across, and if you were not smart about it, you might even get a hernia. It was so heavy. You won't believe it, contained a storage capacity of 1 megabyte. And that was considered breakthrough. Today my mobile phone has 64 GB. So, so when you sort of look at that comparison, you realize how much advance we've made, not only in management practice, but also in the usage of technology in our sphere, management sphere particularly. Today, without technology, I think in terms of management, we would be completely lost, because it has pervaded every aspect of our lives. As Dr. Barki mentioned in his presentation this morning, even a 2.5-year-old child can use an iPad. It's that simple. And it's that seamless. So end-user computing, the way we've made these tremendous strides, and we are now on the cusp of actually getting to a point where there's something known as neural computing, where they're not even, finite bytes on, off, or whatever it is. They're gray shades. And neural computing will have tremendous application in terms of being able to build up certain predictability, as well as look at gray areas. So there's no black and white. There are gray areas also. You might find cars being driven or accidents being prevented with the advent of all these various technologies. So what I thought I would dwell on today, since we've since the topic is contemporary management practices, is to look at the role of one of the key members, I think, today in the boardroom environment, that's the CIO. What is required of him? And rather than dwell on his skill sets, which are very finite these days, look at the aspects that make him successful, the soft side, the soft skills. What are the soft skills? Is it just enough to be absolutely accurate and build these symmetrical models which spew out vast amounts of data and then manage to put them into multi-dimensional table arrays, which is not two-dimensional, like spreadsheets, but multi-dimensional, and as data marts, flip them over, slice them, dice them, and look at different aspects and do what is known as data mining and data warehousing. So the analytics involved there are very, very complex. But today's business executive is not prepared to wait for someone to do all this modeling for him. They want it in real time. So for instance, if I'm selling a consumable product, I want to know what is the reach into my rural area and how much is my competition doing. Am I exceeding the expectation, or am I below expectation in terms of selling? Am I hitting my targets, or am I not hitting my targets? Are my salesmen doing a good job? And all this now with these tremendously fast computing that's at your fingertips in real time. So life has changed dramatically. But what makes life foreseeably manageable for organizations is the role that the technology purveyor, that is a CIO, you have the CXO, that's the CEO, CFO, CMO, Chief Management Marketing Officer, etc., etc. You have the CIO. So the role that he plays is very, very key in the success of an organization. And most companies, forward-thinking companies, have begun to understand that they now have to be not only completely understanding of the business, but also have to be strategic, besides tactical, in their thinking, to be able to take their organizations forward so that they have an edge. So I'm going to talk about the edge. What is the edge that is required for the particular individual to be successful? Now, many of you, at some point in time, will become business leaders, and might even end up in this kind of a role, even though you may not have a technology background, because there's nothing that says that you have to be well versed in technology, but you have to actually understand how you harness technology. How do you harness technology and use it in a management sense? So that's what I'd like to talk about. Now, as I was talking during the tea break, to many of you this may be water off a duck's back, because it may not make sense to you, and you say, oh, well, I'll deal with it when I need it 15 years hence, or whatever it is. Let me tell you a little story. I had a discussion when I was a little older than you guys. I'm talking about the students here, not the brilliant faculty, which is also very young, I must say, and I must compliment Colonel Mahanda Singh in choosing such a combination of beauty and brains. I've never seen a faculty which has been so well evolved in both areas. So it's very, very impressive. And as Dr. Vij said, you've been here for some time. That shows your commitment and your commitment to your students, which is a brilliant thing. So anyway, I was talking about this conversation that I had with my parents, and I had a fairly expensive education, good schools, good college, etc., etc. Post-graduation was also in a very nice location in Bangalore. And I had this discussion with my parents. At that time I was working for IBM, and I must have been around 4 or 5 years into it. And I told them, I said, look, everything is meritocratic in the environment that I work in. IBM only works on the basis of performance. So, why, you made so many sacrifices for me and, coughed up so much money, but it's ultimately, it is your performance that matters, not where you were educated and how you were educated, etc., etc. And my parents said, hang on, wait another 10 years and see. When you get into the area or the realm of middle to senior level management, you'll begin to understand how the environment that you've been nurtured in will affect you. So I would enjoin all of you young men and women who are on the threshold of entering the management arena is to listen carefully to what your professors, what your teachers tell you, and try and absorb it and tuck it away for the future, because someday you're going to say, my goodness, that's what my professor told me and I didn't pay attention. I didn't pay heed. Because with the impetuosity of youth sometimes, one tends to relegate what is said into the background and be a little dismissive. So anyway, I am now going to tell you something which you probably will not need for 15 years, but nevertheless, let's talk about the soft skills that are required. In the interest of time, I had maybe about 8-9 points. I will cluster them together into 3 clusters so that we can discuss it quickly, and I'll leave a little bit of time for any questions that you might have, because it might be a little confusing, so I'd like to clarify. First, I would cluster collaboration, networking, and teamwork. So these are 3 very important aspects that are good, and I think this applies not just to a technology purveyor, but it applies to a lot of business focus areas, whether it's marketing or whether it's sales or whether it's finance or whatever it is. I think a lot of this logic holds true for a successful senior executive to be able to perform his task or her task, as the case may be. One of the things I would like to mention is that very often the success or failure of a senior executive is not determined by how skilled he or she is. It is determined to a large degree by their ability to handle relationships. So you may have a couple of virtues, for example, your education, so that's easy, right? You may put in enormous amounts of energy, which again is your prerogative, and you expect to go forward. And then over time you build up experience. But all of this, needs to be bound together by relationship management. So how you succeed in life and how you succeed in industry is going to be determined by these soft skills that I'm going to. First 3 I mentioned, put them in one cluster: collaboration, what was the second one? Networking and team building. Thank you. Yes, very good. Yeah, you're actually paying attention. Thanks so much. So again, when you're working with groups of people, your end user customers, and so on and so forth, and trying to evolve a strategy for an organization, a smart CXO will understand, though he may be a great thinker, he will have to make certain compromises. Maybe compromise is not a good word, but maybe he'd have to make certain modifications to his strategy if he's going to get everyone to embrace it. And that is very key. So how you collaborate with your various other functional departments, how you collaborate with your outsourced vendors, how you collaborate with the outside world, how you collaborate with your internal customers, is all going to determine how well you are and how successful you're going to be. Similarly, team building is very important, because within the organization you need to walk the talk and you need to perceive to be somebody who actually emulates what you want your team to practice. How well you choose the business leaders who are going to be working with you is going to how you are perceived by the other functions in the organization. So that's very, very key. Together would be, let's say, organizational change, vendor management, and business process engineering. That's also very key. Organizational management is usually the prerogative of the HR department. But the kind of person that we were talking over tea, the kind of person that you go and hire is you'll have a much higher success rate if you know exactly the person that you want. Right? That's why I must compliment good looks and brains, you know. So he knows exactly the kind of model that he wants in his faculty. So similarly here, it's very easy for you to, if the other party is receptive, to actually model the kind of person you're going out to hire. But to cull through reams and reams of applications and try and find the right person, interview them, and going through the interview process is quite difficult. So here again, the successful organizational, what to call it, development, because is about what he wants from his people and how he wants them. If you're not going outside on an organization, the kind of exposure that you give them, the kind of responsibility that you give them, the kind of mistakes that you let them make, the kind of allowances that you cut is very important. Because it's not that you're looking at a contest, and therefore because you are focusing on skills, you're perceived as being soft. Not at all. Because certain values don't change. Whether a person is useful to an organization is again based on performance. So performance-based, performance-rated appraisals are very, very key. And you must also have the ability, just like you hire, to also fire if someone is not coming up to expectations. However, to give people enough room in that area. Vendor management, again, very, very key, because how you manage your vendors, particularly in the technology space, with cloud computing and with offline storage and stuff like that, and also networking, your network operations center, NOC, may be outsourced to one of the big players, etc., etc. Again, how you're perceived by your vendors, how you manage your vendors, and remember, your vendors of yesterday are your partners of tomorrow. So how you deal with them, how fairly you deal with them, is also very, very key. What were the other two that I mentioned? You're the one with the good memory.
Something binary.
No, business re-engineering and okay, I think the business, oh yes, and board management, right? So you're on the board management. So again, business engineering, not everyone has been equipped to re-engineer the organization to be able to avail themselves of the best that technology has to offer. So this is a very, very irksome and a very hard process for any organization that is introducing meaningfully. Now you have to set realistic expectations, and I said before, you have to let go on certain things, even though you feel it's in the best interest of the organization, if the organization is not prepared to embrace it. Because there's no point in having the perfect ERP system, enterprise resource planning system, in your organization, if every department is not going to make use of it and embrace it. Because then you will find, very soon you will find that people are the biggest barriers to the successful rollout of any system that you may implement. Right? Let me come to last. Now, last of all, I'm trying to sort of crunch this all together so that we can get through, and because there's so many papers to be presented, is presentation skills. Now, a CIO or a CXO who cannot present with good slides and, with a little bit of music and lights and song and dance, maybe some dancing girls also, I don't know, but I've seen some weird presentations, believe me, it's particularly American companies. They specialize at rockets firing off and literally girls dancing across the stage, etc., etc., when they're rolling out a new product. It's amazing. You will all experience something like this at some point in time in your lives. But presentation skills, writing skills also, how well you are able to articulate and put down your thoughts is very, very key. Because people will buy into it if you have the right paper. Even when you meet someone in the corridor and he's saying, hey, that point we were talking about, if you're not able to articulate it properly and not convince them, you will not get someone on your side. Okay? The third one? I didn't. Okay. Board management I did. Did I talk about board management? Oh, now you are in the board, so it's very important to have these skills. Okay? So presentation skills, writing skills, and the last one is a sixth sense. So you have to have the sixth sense, and the sixth sense tells you what is going to work and what is not going to work. Now that's an immeasurable. Unfortunately, it's not quantifiable. It's something that comes from your ability to be able to handle EQ, as we talked about EQ this morning, your ability, not only your intelligence, which must be paramount, but your ability to understand what will be acceptable, what will be not acceptable, and to know when to not run away, but to walk away from a confrontation. Okay, because no organizations wants to have somebody in such a role who is confrontational, who is dictatorial, because he's not going to get along with everybody, and anything that he may choose to roll out is going to fail. So these are and the last point, and this is not really on the list of points that I want to share with you, is my personal philosophy is you cannot make an omelette without breaking eggs. So you have to have courage. And remember that Cicero, or that Napoleon, who loved this quotation from Cicero, always said that an army of rabbits led by a lion will always overcome an army of lions that is led by a rabbit. So leadership skills, that's another topic altogether. We'll talk about it hopefully sometime. But today I want to leave you with these few points on soft skills, which if you use them strategically, will win you major rewards. Remember this 15 years later. Write it down, write my name, and open it 15 years later and see whether I was right or not. Okay? So, I hope I haven't exceeded my personal time allocation. I'll take questions. Any questions? Any questions? Last time you guys badgered me with 1.5 hours of questions, I remember. So any questions this time? No. Oh, it's always difficult. Yes. Someone at the back? No. All right. Okay. So on that basis, I will thank you very much for your attention. I know I stand between. Yes. Yes, you have a question.
When the organization is talking about the CIO and CIFO,
CFO,
yes. And I heard of CTFO also.
CTO.
Okay,
CTO.
so I'm not able to.
What are these CXOs? Okay.
Yes. What are the main key area they are looking for?
All right. Typically, an organization will have a chief executive officer, who's the point man. He will be supported by a whole bunch of CXOs. One will be a chief operating officer. There'll be a chief financial officer. There'll be maybe a chief marketing officer if they're in consumer products and stuff like that. And a CIO who's now acquired a different status altogether as opposed to in the past. That's the chief information officer. So he's responsible for building the technology in the organization to enable them to be able to succeed. He need not even be a technology person. He could come from the marketing stream. He could come from even the finance stream. But in the past, the CIO used to be masked under the chief financial officer or under the CEO and never attend the board meetings. So the CEO, he would become just one point, IT, and they would tick and move forward. Now that IT is used so strategically, it is imperative that the CIO is also present in the boardroom, hence the boardroom analogy that I mentioned. He is very much one of the CXOs in the boardroom, and it is his thinking and his ability to comprehend the business exigencies that actually leads towards the of the organization. It's very, very key. Yeah, thank you for asking that question, because I'm sure that must have confused a lot of people. Any other question? Where's my famous friend Rajnikant? He's not here? Okay. He's on leave today? He's placed. Oh, I see. Where's he placed? Well, I hope. Right. I remember Gurleen and quite a number of... Anyway, whatever it is. I don't want to come between lunch and our papers presented. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye.